Hello and welcome to From the BLN, the Burnley podcast. I'm Andrew Greaves, and we thought we'd get together for a little midweek talking point YouTube exclusive episode. We're going to do a few more of these where we put content out on our YouTube channel. Got Darren Bentley with me and the guy who I get more text messages about than I get about Mike Trezor. Where is he? When's he coming back? When's he back on the grass? Like a new signing. Justin Connolly looking refreshed.
Good evening.
Maybe a week or so behind on pre-season, still on the beers.
Yeah,
slightly
absolutely.
Worrying with the season already underway.
Yeah,
I've been scouting in south of France.
I have. I know I've been missing, but I'm not one of these people who hates the summer because there's no football. Football to me is misery, right? So the summer is like respite.
I'm with him.
And I'm just incapable of thinking about football when it's sunny because I can't be miserable when it's sunny.
I love that.
The season started now, so we've got to make a comeback, haven't we?
We've got to make a comeback. Well, it's good to see you, mate. We thought we'd get together and just talk about something we perhaps expected to happen, but seems to be gathering a bit of pace. Lots of reports that Burnley are in talks with Espanyol. That new plaything of ALK, Alan Pace and JJ Watts over in La Liga, about a return to El Prat and the stadium there in Catalonia of Luca Koleosho. Now, I know we've got some fairly split opinions within the pod squad about the next step in the development of Koleosho. So we're going to have a chat about that. We, of course, have got a couple of fan videos as well. Some of our listeners and viewers contributing as well. We're going to do a bit more of that as well. But Daz, kick us off. I mean, in the pod a couple of weeks ago, I think it was, we were kind of almost ganging up on Chris Boredom by saying, I'm not that bothered if Koleosho goes, but it seems strange, doesn't it, that we're looking at a player who was the subject of a £20 million bid from Wolves, looking at shipping him out on loan because he can't get in the match day squad for Burnley. It's a bit of a strange turnaround from 12 months ago, isn't it?
It wasn't 2 weeks ago, by the way. It was last week.
Last week, Christ.
We predicted this. We're enablers. That's what we are. We're enablers. It's inevitable for me that he's going to go. It was a week ago. It was 2 weeks ago. Probably was in the summer. You know, he clearly is not in Scott Parker's plans. And I think it was Chris yourself mentioned about a loan move might be better than selling him. I was all for getting rid, to be fair, and bringing the money in and using that money along with 6 or 7 others that we can ship out and use that money to buy a decent striker, to buy another centre back, whatever we need. But it seems inevitable he's going to go. I mean, he isn't featuring in any squads. Can't really recall what he's been in. I'm not really a fan of following pre-season, so I don't quite know what time he's had in pre-season. But I just think, you know, he struggled last time in the Championship. In the Premier League, he had a little bit more joy. And I know Chris's belief is that when teams push up on Burnley a little bit more, there's a little bit more room in behind. But we're talking about Van der Ven and athletes who can run 100 metres in 10 seconds here. So he's not going to do that every week and trounce sides. So for me, get him out the door. Espanyol sounds like a good stop for me.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I agree, I think. But I think it's a mystery to me, almost of Trezor-esque proportions, what's happened to him over the last 18 months, really. I mean, I know he had quite a serious injury, didn't he, in halfway through that Premier League season where he started really well, impressed, was perhaps the only sort of bright shining star in that first half of that season. But and I was really thrilled when he wasn't one of those players who disappeared, 12 months ago in that crazy transfer window. But he just didn't seem to kick on. Whether he hasn't come back quite the same as he was before the injury. I mean, he was out for a long time. But aside from that, stellar moment at Ellen Road against Leeds, didn't really do much in the Championship. I thought he was going to rip that place apart when he stayed. The difference, obviously, between now and then is a different manager, as Daz touched on. Then maybe Scott Parker just doesn't fancy him. Last season, we played a formation where there was a sort of natural position for him. If we're going to do this 3-4-3 that, it looks like we've at least started with, and I'm not sure we have a spot for like an out-and-out pacey, wide player. It's players like Anthony and Edwards who can play a little bit further inside. He's not one of those players. At best, he's going to be an impact sub coming on when the game gets a bit stretched towards the end. So what we saw in that first season was potential, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He had a lot of rough edges about him. He was raw pace, and he needs to polish that up, and he's not going to do that on the bench at Burnley, or not even getting on the bench at Burnley. So I think it's inevitable that best for all parties. There's no point in him staying at Burnley if he's not going to play, and I can't see him getting that many minutes this season.
No, I looked at his stats for last season because we were having this discussion on his WhatsApp group, and I did think, latter part of the season he didn't really feature much, and since January 1st, he actually only featured in 6 matches. So the second half of the season, he was not in the squad, I think, for about 8 of those games. Now, there may have been an injury issue, but 2 for 6 of those games not in the squad, on the bench, and didn't come on for a lot of them games, but actually only featured in 6 games. His biggest appearance was 83 minutes against QPR in the 5-0 win, but he had 1 minute appearance against Bristol Rovers at home, a 3-minute appearance against West Brom at home, and an 8-minute appearance against Sunderland at home in and amongst those 6 games that he played. So, as soon as Marcus Edwards is in the door, and even a bit before that, because I think Edwards probably came in mid-January. From then, basically from when Edwards came in, he barely featured. It was such a turnaround. I think you're right, Justin. I think what we saw in that first Premier League season was raw potential. I questioned with, some people are sitting here on the turf, his attitude at times and his body language. Daz, have you ever spotted Koleosho's body language? He almost looks like he's, I don't know, he doesn't look a natural, I don't want to say natural team player, that's unfair, but he just seems a bit sulky, and he's somebody who's really easily frustrated.
Well, there's a few players have that sort of hangdog expression, and the shoulders go down a little bit, and I think a lot of that was of his own doing. He runs into blind alleys, he loses the ball, whatever it might be. He can't get the crossing at the end of a run, whatever it might be. But and you're right in some ways. Maybe I don't think maybe it's about being constantly down and having being a totally confidence player, but it's all about raw ability, and it's about belief, and it's about what you've got in the heart. Now, Chris mentioned on the pod that he felt if he went, and he's all for keeping Koleosho, by the way, he felt it was a failing on Burnley's part if we haven't brought him on. But I'd flip that on its head. Managers and coaching staff can do so much, but you've got to have it here. And if you haven't got it here, then, and you can't do it yourself, why should others do it for you? So, you're right. He hasn't played well. He hasn't played well. It's hard when you come on for 5 and 6 minutes to make any impact, by the way. That's not an easy task for anybody. But if he's doing it in training, and he's got it here, and he's showing it in training, he gets his chance. And there's clearly something's not quite right. There's a disconnect there. So, off you go, Ben. Off you go. It seems that way to me.
Are you surprised, Justin, at his lack of development? I mean, I think we saw when Anthony came in, there was a raw talent there. I know he got an assist on his against Rovers, his first appearance, put the cross in for Lyle Foster's header. But we saw a real development curve, didn't we, with Anthony? Whether that was kind of just confidence, whether that was, being with a familiar coach and things like that. Are you surprised that Koleosho, under Scott Parker, who we praised quite a lot last season for developing and bringing on players like Egan Riley, Trafford to a degree, are you surprised that he's not developed into the player we thought he could be before that injury?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I really thought he was going to rip the Championship apart with his pace. If he did as well as he did in the Premier League for that first half of the season, then he's playing against teams that are nowhere near that level. But Anthony's Parker's man, isn't he? He knows him well. He knows what he knows what he can do. He knows he fits into the way that he wants to play. I do suspect that there's a chance that Koleosho does not fit that mould. He doesn't. His way of playing doesn't seem to suit the Parker way of playing. But I am really surprised that he's not adapted his game to that. He's not progressed in that way that we thought he might. Like I say, there could be repercussions from the injury still hampering his game. But it is disappointing after the first 6 months of that Premier League season where we thought he was going to be a world beater, that it's ended up the way that it has. But like I said, if he's going to improve, if he's going to polish those areas of his game that he needs to polish to become one of those players that can feature for us in the Premier League, he needs to play football, and he's not going to play football in the Premier League regularly enough to get that experience.
He's a touchline hugger, isn't he? What he is an out-and-out touchline hugger. He gets chalk on his boots. And you look at a Scott Parker team, and it isn't going to have a player in it who's got chalk on his boots, or is maybe inflexible to the system. Anthony can play down the left wing, and he likes to get a chalk on his boots, but he can come in. He could play as a 10, I think, Anthony.
Yeah.
On the other side, he's brought Brun Larson in.
Yeah,
so he's now even further in the packing order because Brun Larson's coming in this summer.
And Brun Larson's got that little bit of pace as well, hasn't he? Who could be an impact but he can also play in the middle. It's a little bit. I think it's a little similar to the situation at United. The Amorim's playing this 3-4-3 thing with them, and they don't need wingers, which is why Rashford's gone, which is why Anthony's gone, which is why Garnacho can't get in the set. It's a little bit. Slightly different level, and we know that United have had massive success with that formation over the last sort of 12 months. So it's no wonder that we are, look like we might be sort of aping it a little bit. But it's a similar sort of situation, is it? He doesn't seem to fit into that sort of new. This is the new thing that everybody's doing now, isn't it? And
but of course Edwards does, because he fit into that Amorim system at Sporting, didn't he? You know what I mean? So he is that kind of player. It's that almost kind of. I don't know what you'd call it. It's not a false 9, it's not a false 10. It's
like an inside forward, isn't it?
Yeah, slightly wide 10. I don't know what you'd call it.
The days of a Leyton James taking a man on and crossing a ball from the touchline are gone. We won't see that at Burnley. Certainly under Parker. That's not our style, is it? Unless it's an overlapping fullback.
There wouldn't be anybody in the middle to get on the end of it anyway.
That is very true. That is very true. That is very true. Right, let's take a pause there. Like I say, we've got some fan videos. First of all, we're going to hear from Andrew Howarth at Always Claret on X, I think we have to call it now. He produced some fantastic matchday graphics and things like that. But this is Andrew's thoughts on Koleosho's potential move to Espanyol.
So Luca Koleosho could be off to Espanyol. Not going to lie, I'm a little bit disappointed. I think it is a shame, the lad does have a high ceiling. There's obviously a lot of potential there. He is a raw talent. And I am a little bit disappointed to see that he's not going to be part of the squad for this season. I think last time in the Premier League, until he got his injury, he was, one of the highlights for us. And I think he will be a big, big miss this season. I think the counter-attack is going to be important for us in how we attack teams. We saw a little bit of that at Spurs. Granted, sometimes we had a bit more of the ball than just a counter-attack. But yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed in terms of, losing Luca potentially for the season. At least it's only a loan. Hopefully it does get him a little bit of game time, but the options we've got on the wing, I would have liked to keep him for the season. I think he would have done well.
Just looking there, he talks about kind of it's only a loan and he can come back into side. Is that how you guys kind of envisage this going, in terms of, he's going away, he's going to develop, and then he's going to come back? A full season in La Liga near enough, Justin, is something to be granted to a player who you then hope grasps it with both hands and challenges, isn't it?
Yeah, because it's a decent standard, isn't it? I don't think you face the same test as you do in the Premier League week in, week out in La Liga, but it's one of the top leagues in Europe. So if he does get game time week in, week out, then he can have no complaints about not being given the opportunity to develop in the way we want him to develop. So yeah, I think the fact that it's only a loan shows that we do have a little bit of faith in him. I'm not sure who we are negotiating with at Espanyol, given that we have the same ownership.
Alan Pace, on a Teams call with Alan Pace, I think.
Is it one of those where he sits on one side of the table and goes, "Look, Alan, we're not going to accept anything less than this," and then he runs around the other side of the table and goes, "Well, I'm not prepared to pay that. I'm sorry." I mean, how do these negotiations work themselves out? It's a bit strange, isn't it? But that being a given, it's the same school, it's the same, he's got the same paymasters, so we're obviously hoping that the time out there will turn him into the player, or at least get him a little bit closer to the player that we thought he could become.
Yeah, I should just point out
in here. I'll throw a grenade in
Daz.
here. There was mention there that it was on the counter-attack, but I don't see us being a counter-attacking side. I don't necessarily see Burnley setting up deep and counter-attacking teams. I think we'll sit deep and we'll try and progress up the pitch. And I think we brought Breuer in as the outball. Breuer at Everton ran a lot of the channels. He runs the channels well, he holds the ball up, and then you get the players up in support. That's a different kind of player than counter-attack. And I don't see us just running and countering on teams.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because obviously that is where we saw Koleosho at his best against Leeds. I should just point out that we believe that the takeover hasn't actually happened yet because, as with all these things, the Spanish sports department has to ratify the deal. But it is, I mean, it, for all intents and purposes. I mean, Pace was there, JJ Watt was there, and a lot of the talk was around kind of the club's in good hands with Alan. So I think there's an expectation it will go through, but I do quite like the two versions of our very own Kermit the Frog sat at either side, just talking to each other. I am hoping Russell Ball might make a trip out to Catalonia and try and introduce a drum to the Espanyol fans, because he might end up sticking it over his head. We've got a couple more videos to go. Next one from Leyton Bracegirdle. Again, big Claret. He sent us this video.
I'm pretty gutted about it, to be honest, because I really thought this season was going to be one where he kicked on in the Premier League. Obviously, didn't have the best season for us in the Championship. We all thought he was going to be one of the players for us last season. It didn't quite happen, but I genuinely actually thought this season he was going to be a starter for us. It's quite surprising, especially a couple of seasons ago when we went down. There was the rumours that he was going to go to Wolves for like 30-40 million, and that's not quite happened, so he's not kind of become that player yet. But hopefully if he does go to Espanyol, he'll kick on there, and we haven't seen the last of him in Claret and Blue. Hopefully he'll be back in a Burnley shirt. But yeah, I guess he's so far down the pecking order now that he isn't really going to make the first team, sadly, as a starter. We've got so many wingers, so hopefully he can get in the first team in Espanyol, kick on, and then come back to us when we're still in the Premiership next season.
There we are. Blind optimism from Leyton there. Looking resplendent, I have to say, in that new Burnley shirt, which does look fantastic.
Didn't look quite as purple then as it
It didn't, does it? No, it doesn't in real life, you see. Maybe it's Leyton's camera.
Still not as good as that picture behind him.
That is a good picture. I love the way he's framed that video. Well done, Leyton. Yeah. Again, two things, common theme. Surprised he didn't kick on in the Championship. Hoping he goes away and comes back. I mean, we have got a lot of wingers. You do wonder kind of how many we'll have at the end of the transfer window. I think, Mike Trezor linked with a move away. Matt Scrafton from the Burnley Express says that while they expect him to leave before the end of the transfer window, he won't be going over to Espanyol. Manuel Benson played, I think, for the under-21s yesterday. Do we kind of look at that, Darren, and think, you know what, maybe he is the person who's going to force his way to the kind of front of the back of the queue, if that makes sense? I mean, it looks like kind of, your Edwards, your Brun Larsons, your Anthony's are the kind of the three out-and-out wingers that are going to be rotating. But, do you see a time when Manuel Benson, another forgotten man of Turf Moor, features, or is he just getting fit and he's also going to perhaps move on to obscurity before the end of the window?
I think the cull is on. I think Benson's another one who's going to head out the door. And you mentioned there we'll end up with Edwards and JBL, and we'll end up with Anthony on the left. But you've got that flexibility within that squad then of someone like Hannibal who can play out left, Foster who can play out left. So you've got the players who can cover on the left-hand side when Anthony doesn't play there, or when he's out, or when he comes inside, or whatever it might be. So there's flexibility there. And that's what the squad needs, is flexibility. It doesn't need these hardened positions of 2 right wingers, 2 left wingers, 4 strikers, wherever it might be. We need a flexible squad. But there's 7 or 8 players who can head out the door in that squad, and it won't lessen the squad at all. We've got more than a team and a bench of people who aren't getting game time. They're sat at home on their phones on a Saturday afternoon. So there needs to be a cull, especially if, as we think, and as Scott Parker's alluded to, we still need bodies in the door. We think we still need potentially a central mid. We need a centre-back. We need a striker. You're not going to bring 3 more in and have a squad of nearly 40 without getting rid of some of that deadwood. And I said deadwood in the nicest possible terms, because I think Luca, Benson, some of those other players will leave with the fans' best wishes, but they're not going to play.
Yeah.
So you've got to be heartless in this game, and it's about Burnley. It's not about individuals.
Yeah. Do we get too attached, Justin? I mean, I think it would have been inconceivable to have lost Luca Koleosho last window. It would have been inconceivable to have lost Anas Zaroury and Benson in that first Premiership summer. But none of them players have gone on to then, do anything. I mean, Zaroury was frozen out, ended up at bloody Hull. Benson was, just couldn't stay fit. Do we get too attached to players? I mean,
the stars aligned, didn't they? The stars just aligned that season, and that's why we fell in love with that squad. Yeah. It was just as easy it was to fall in love with that squad. It was easy to fall out of love with the Premier League squad.
I don't know. We complained, didn't we, that the turnover of players was too great, so we couldn't get attached to these players.
Yeah, correct.
You want to get attached to them. You want to have your heroes. You want to have those players who you look forward to seeing play on a. I was going to say Saturday afternoon, but it's rarely Saturday. You want to get attached to those players. But I think the bottom line here is we've got too many players.
Yeah.
We've got too many players, and it doesn't look like he's going to play this season. I mean, it's very, very early days, but it doesn't look like he's going to play with out-and-out wingers. Seems to be going out of fashion, that sort of tactical setup. And, we've amassed a few wingers, so they're the ones who are heading for the exit, aren't they? And again, I'll just say the same thing. If they're not going to play, there's no point in them taking a wage, is there? So we need to cull that squad a little bit. As Daz says, we've got far, far too many players, and there's going to be so many players who are just sitting at home taking a wage, who have got no realistic prospect of breaking into the team. Not because they're not good players. I mean, we're attached to Benson for obvious reasons. We all think Koleosho's got great potential, but the way the team has been set up, or it looks like we're going to set up, there just isn't a place for them on the pitch anyway. It's not that they're not good enough. It's just that we're not playing that way with those kind of players. So I think Benson maybe is slightly different to Koleosho in that he can, he likes to come inside, doesn't he? As we saw often to our credit that season. But he's another one of those players. He's at probably behind several other players in the queue. So. Yeah. We need to get these players off the wage bill, and we need to strengthen in those players in those positions that Daz mentioned. And we're very, very light at centre back, aren't we? I mean, I don't think we can go into this season relying on Jordan Bayer playing a big part of it. It would be very irresponsible of us to expect that. I quite like. I'm a big fan of Ekdal. I think he's a great player. I thought he did well for us last time, and obviously we know that Estev's got the credentials, but beyond that, there's not a lot there. So we need, we don't need more wide players. We need players in the positions that we need to strengthen. And that means, unfortunately, some of these players that have grown on us, of the ones who've stuck around from that early Vincent Company period, like Benson, they're the ones who are going to have to make way, aren't they?
Yeah. Let's leave it there. We're going to leave you with the thoughts of Nathan Rogers. Going to hand him the final word. But do make sure you hit the subscribe button below. Like I say, we're going to do a bit more kind of video-only content, just because we know you like looking at middle-aged blokes with varying amounts of hair. Talking midweek about certain topics. It's a very acquired taste, I get you, but yeah, do make sure you subscribe to the channel. I know Simon's had a bit of a play about, so you should be able to find all the various bits, whether it's the main pod, the reaction pods, and things like that. But yeah, we're going to leave you with this tonight. This is the thoughts of Nathan Rogers.
Right then, Koleosho, probably the first sort of big outgoing of the summer. Being reported to be going, obviously our second club in the ALK portfolio, Espanyol. Obviously I've got mixed feelings. I'm sort of not bothered if he goes or stays. I think that's the general consensus. I think his output isn't justified to make up a bit of a fuss about him leaving, nor is it enough to kick up a stink about wanting him to stay. I think the times he's been on the pitch, he has sort of run in pretty straight lines and not really done much with it. He had a sort of brief start in the Premier League where he bagged a goal against, I think it was Chelsea, and he looked good and he looked exciting, he looked fresh, and then obviously got the injury and never really sort of got himself straight after that. And then the Championship season comes around, he makes a good start, and then again, Scott Parker doesn't really use him for the rest of the season. He only uses him in fits and spurts. And yeah, I mean, if Parker doesn't want to use him, then what is the point in keeping him in the building? We've got a big wage bill, we've got a big squad we need to trim down. And I remember he wanted to sort of leave the door and go to Wolves at one point. So he obviously isn't that fussed about being here, till death do him part sort of thing. So am I that bothered from leaving? No. Would it be nice to keep him around? Probably. I don't know. My only thought is we get him out the door and we can potentially bring in a new face and sort of strengthen where we need to strengthen, instead of carrying players that aren't going to get utilised and aren't going to deliver the quality that we need in the Premier League.
Up the Clarets.